And you have to step back and go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Why are we electrifying? What's the problem we're solving by electrifying? What happens if we just put 2 words on the label? What happens if we just add the word gravy lovers? We literally add those 2 words to the label. The following year, that SKU has a 50% increase in sales. That's where you can get in a death spiral from an innovation standpoint, is you get too focused on what they're saying versus what they mean. The goal is still the same, which is to convince people that have been doing something the same way forever to do it differently now. And that is always the hardest part of innovation.
Welcome back to Innovation Impossible. In each episode of this podcast, we dive deep into the world of product innovation, bringing you insightful conversations with industry leaders behind some of the coolest products in fields as diverse as smart devices, crypto, fashion, logistics, pharmaceuticals, and many more. Our guests share their processes, challenges, and triumphs in creating groundbreaking products. From who to hire to the systems they create at enterprise companies, from research methodology to marketing, from innovation frameworks to the challenges they faced and how they overcame them. Whether you're a serial entrepreneur working at an enterprise company on an insights or innovation team, you're a product designer, or you just love product design and innovation, Innovation Impossible offers practical lessons and inspiration to help you navigate your own product development journey. Today, I'm joined by Jeff Barry, the Chief Innovation Officer at Dot Foods and Adjunct Professor of Innovation at St. Louis University. Over the last 20 years, Jeff has helped launch million-dollar products like Bud Light Lime, Lime-A-Ritas, and Beneful. He's applied his extensive experience in consumer insights and marketing innovation to brands across the spectrum, from scrappy cannabis startups to billionaire entrepreneurs and Fortune 50 companies, including Anheuser-Busch, Nestle, and Wells Fargo. I couldn't be happier to share this conversation with Jeff with you and learn from his unique, groundbreaking approaches that have produced continually unbelievable results across a wide range of industries. Welcome to the show, Jeff. Really glad you could join us.
Thanks for having me, Dan. It's great to be here.
Thanks. So let's kick it off with the Alpo launch. You rebranded it as Gravy Lovers to meet consumer expectations. How did you identify that this mismatch between messaging and consumer experience was the core issue with the product's reception?
Well, so, to back up, I think that all innovation, no matter what, starts with consumer insight. And embedded in that consumer insight is always, what is the actual problem that you're trying to solve. So all innovation needs to start with that. If it doesn't, then then you create products or you do things that don't solve a problem in the marketplace. And so you can create amazing things that don't resonate with people, and it's because you're not solving a problem for them. So, when we were working on Alpo, the interesting thing is it's canned dog food in, gravy. And there's 2 different forms of it. One is like cubes and chunks of it, and the other one are thin slices. Well, when you put them in a can, it's the same amount of meat in there, but when they bounce around on a truck and go through the logistics network, the cubes don't settle quite as much as the little slices do. And so when consumers would open it, what they would see is nothing but liquid on the slices one, and they could see the meat sticking out of the top on the other one. And so, the idea was, well, consumers are angry, or they don't want this one because it doesn't have any meat in it. And so the whole point was, how do you get more meat in there? And sitting through these conversations over and over, you just can't, if you're in my role, you've got to constantly be asking yourself, what is the actual problem we're solving here? And so when you step back
Yeah.
and you allow yourself to kind of back up from the conversation and listen to what's happening around you, you understand quickly that the problem is not that there's less meat in there, because there's the same amount of meat in there. So if that's true, if you start with that as a true statement, which we knew was true, by weight, same exact amount of meat, then what is the actual problem you're solving? It's not because it has less meat. You already know that's not true. So then what is the problem? Well, the problem is a consumer perception problem. And so you know, just I sat back for a second and said, after like an hour of how do we add more meat but not raise the cost, and said, well, we have a perception problem. They open the can, they're expecting to see meat. So let's just change their perception about what they're about to find. And so I said, what happens if we just put two words on the label? What happens if we just add the word gravy lovers to the label? And so we went out, we did all the consumer testing. Consumers like the idea, dogs love gravy, and so all this stuff. So we literally add those two words to the label. The following year, that SKU has a 50% increase in sales. And it's simply because, sometimes I think the core of that, Dan, is two things. One is really understand the problem that you're trying to solve, number one. And number two is that all innovation doesn't have to be George Jetson, land on the moon, kind of crazy kind of stuff, Elon Musk kind of stuff. Innovation can be all things kind of in between as long as you're solving a problem. And so that's what we did with that brand years ago.
So there you kind of innovated on the messaging itself. The product didn't change. It was more the perception, how people received it in the market, yeah?
That's right. There are many, many examples out there around where the way you talk about something matters. So like, not to be political, but years ago they used to refer to when you pass away an estate tax, and people didn't really understand what that was, and so they rebranded that, if you will, and said, "Hey, it's a death tax. When you die, they're going to tax you." And the American public went, "Whoa, whoa, wait a minute! I die and now I owe more taxes?" And so literally nothing changed about it, but the way you talked about it. And so innovation is not just the physical thing, it's everything about how you present things and how you adjust to what's happening. And so I think that is a core part of innovation, is how do you describe, how do you communicate what it is you're actually doing? What's the problem? What's the solve?
And were there any challenges or consumer reactions that you didn't expect to this Alpo rebrand?
Honestly, no. And I think but to me, that's kind of the cool thing. When you've nailed it, all you get is, yeah, that's what I want. I want more of that. And so when you don't get much pushback, you're over the target and you've got it. And so I think that is confirmation that the hard work you've done to get to that point, and the ability to step back and relook at what you're doing and come back at it again through a different lens is on point, and is on target.
And, like, if we dive into the details a bit more, where did this insight come from? Like, you collected, survey responses, I imagine, from people who were using the Alpo, and they were unhappy. They thought there was too much gravy and not enough meat, and then that insight, you guys developed it internally?
So first of all, you could see the sales numbers falling, right? So you've got sales data, so you can see it falling. And then you can look at like consumer complaints, consumer feedback coming through your customer service lines, and those kinds of things. And you can see that there's a pattern in that feedback. And that pattern is, I feel like I'm getting gypped. I feel like I'm not getting my money's worth, those kinds of things. You told me this was going to have all this meat in it, and I open it up and all it is nothing but liquid. So you could go on, social media can tell you some of those things if you go on and you read online reviews and you kind of do a deep dive on that stuff. We didn't even have to go out and talk to consumers to figure it out, because they were already providing this feedback organically. And so we just had to connect the two. Hey, sales are dropping. What are people saying? Oh, hey, wait, this is what they're complaining about. Now, remember, they were complaining about the fact that there wasn't meat in it. Well, we knew, right? Like I said, that's where
Yeah,
you
yeah.
ha- that's where you can get in a death spiral from an innovation standpoint, is you get too focused on what they're saying versus what they mean. Right? You have to be able to see and disconnect those things.
Yeah, yeah. Like, what was it? Ford, no? Had the idea that if you ask customers what they wanted, they'd want a faster horse.
That I have always said, so my background starts with consumer research. That's where my career started and all that. And I say to anybody that comes to consumer research or does consumer research, you have to you have to listen to what people say and understand what they mean, right? And so if you just react to what they're saying, you'll miss it a
Mhm.
lot of the
It's
time. So
reactionary, it's
for I'll give you
defensive.
an example. It's very much so. So when I worked for Anheuser-Busch, if I went out and I asked a bunch of 21 to 25-year-old guys about, whether they would want Bud Light cans made out of solid 24 karat gold, they're going to tell me yes all day long, right? Because beer is a social symbol. You're out at the bar, what's the cool thing you're holding? But if you dig under the surface about why they want that, what is it they're actually wanting? What they want is status. And so do you have to spend billions of dollars on gold and increase the weight of all your, reduce all the product you can put on a truck because it weighs so much more and all these things? No, you don't have to do that. What you have to do is understand what it is they're actually wanting, which is I want status. I want to be holding something that's cool. Well, if that's the goal, then the way you solve for that becomes you end up with 20 options how you could solve that versus locking yourself in on, hey, we have to do this. We have to make it gold. And I think, in some of our early conversations leading up this day, and we were talking about a current version of one of those issues that everybody's dealing with right now in the world around climate change and electrification of vehicles.
Yeah, where the goal's in the wrong place. Everyone's trying to electrify everything, but they're not focused on the core problem, which is climate change, right? And how did you arrive at that conclusion?
Well, again, it's about being able to step back and say, what is the actual problem we're trying to solve here? I go to conferences all the time. I speak all over the place, and people are constant. I get calls from all these vendors and startups, and they're like, "Well, we want to, we're the next great electrification. Hey, we want to electrify your vehicles. Hey, are you doing electric cars? Are you doing electric trucks in your fleet? What's your path to electrification? All of these things." And you have to step back and go, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. Why are we electrifying? What's the problem we're solving by electrifying?" And that's to reduce our carbon emissions. And so if we start with a particular solution in mind, then we're pigeonholing ourselves. If we start with what the actual problem is, which is we want to reduce carbon emissions, then that opens up again the spectrum of things that you can do. So when we reset the problem as we want to lower our carbon footprint, now we've got multiple initiatives going on. So we're coating the top of every one of our refrigerated trailers with a heat reflective coating. It brings down it holds heat, or it holds
Mm.
cold in our trailers longer, reduces the fuel that our refrigerated trailers need. Well, that's not electrification, but it lowers our carbon footprint. We're testing battery packs underneath the trailer that can provide an electric propulsion assist. It can push the trailer behind the truck. The truck still runs on diesel. The truck still burns diesel, but by using electrification on the trailer, we're able to bring down the diesel consumption on our trucks by up to 25 to 30%. And so we didn't
Wow.
electrify the truck. We didn't change anything on the truck. Or a third one that we have in play right now is using AI for our trucks to predict their own maintenance and create their own individual health score per truck. Well, by doing that, those trucks are more efficient, they burn fuel better, and so they lower your diesel consumption, all three of which meet the goal, solve the problem, which is to lower carbon emissions. If we had just started with how do we make the truck an electric truck, we don't do any of those things. And so we limit ourselves in how we're trying to solve the problem.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. And I mean, I imagine there the brand's initial strategy was to electrify their fleet, but then you came in with this shift of focus. And like, how do you pitch that at a foundational level? Especially in terms of the buy-in from leadership.
So I don't know that the company was saying, "Hey, we have to electrify everything." I don't know that that was. I think that's what the marketplace keeps saying. You go out to a
Right.
conference, you talk to people. That's what they keep saying is, "Hey, we got to electrify everything." I think my role internally at Dot is to be a voice of reason around that and say, "Hold on, let's think about how we're going to go about this. What is our point of view? What's the real problem we're trying to solve?" And so I don't know that I had to convince anybody internally that we should move away from an electrification strategy. I think my goal is people ask me, "Hey, are we ready to electrify? Should we be doing these things?" And that's when I can say, "Well, hold on. That's not the problem we're trying to solve here. Here's the problem." And so I can be that voice internally. So when the hardest thing about innovation is getting people to change. So it doesn't matter whether you're making dog food, beer, or you're working in a B2B, a food logistics company like I do now. The problem is still the same. The goal is still the same, which is to convince people that have been doing something the same way forever to do it differently now. And that is always the hardest part of innovation. There's the
Yeah.
front end of innovation where you're coming up with cool ideas and you're testing them and you're figuring out what works and what doesn't work. That's actually pretty easy because I get to play in my own sandbox that I control. And so that's fine. Then when I find an idea and I want the organization to execute it at mass, at scale, and it, like I said, it doesn't matter if it's here or anywhere, that's where it becomes hard because now you've got to. I always refer to companies as a machine. And so that's where you have to you throw it into the machine, and the machine's goal is to kill it. I mean, that's how the machine works. The machine doesn't want you to go forward. The machine runs in a very particular direction, and the machine doesn't like when you try and make it change direction.
It has its momentum already. It's moving forward in that
That's
direction, and
right.
you're kind of trying to nudge it.
That's right. Every one of our companies, anybody that's watching this, your company's got inertia. It's got momentum. It moves in a particular direction. And even if you bring something that is good and can change things and make things better, people we're humans. We're creatures of we're used to doing things a particular way. And so we may recognize that this might be better, but we already know how to do it this way and it works and we get it done and it's so forth and so on. And so now if you want me to change and do something different, I have to learn something different. I got to think more about it and whatnot. That's just human nature. That's not business, that's human nature.
Yeah. And then, so like it wasn't hard to get the company to buy into this idea, but what about the market? If everyone's talking about electrification and they're expecting that your customers, people at these conferences, how do you kind of argue to them that actually, no, this is a better approach to solving this problem?
Well, so just to be clear, just because I can tell people, hey, that the problem that we're trying to solve is this, not this, that doesn't mean when I bring those solutions, everybody internally here says, "Oh, great, go ahead and do it." That's not how that works. So remember, they still have inertia doing the thing they've been doing. And so even though I'm like, okay, the problem we're trying to solve is this, so here's solutions to it. That doesn't mean they want to do those solutions. They still fight you every day. They still try and kill your idea.
Yeah.
So you still have to fight through that. Out externally, you know, I I have a responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility to my company, right? To make sure we're doing the right things. And if by doing that, we can set an example for our customers or be an asset to our customers or our suppliers and share information with them that says, hey, here's what we've done. Here's how we're thinking about this problem. And here's what we've learned. And do you want to partner with us on these things? That's great. But ultimately, they have to make their own decisions and go on their own journey. I have enough trouble fighting my own journey internally. I'm not about to try and haul somebody else's water uphill in a leaky wheelbarrow. That's not happening. It's just I don't have I have enough problems of my own to try and do that externally. I do think it's important for people in my role to when we speak to speak with both a, a grounding in what's the problem. I also think if you work for a company like I do, you always have to add a layer of what's reasonable. So if you're an entrepreneur, you can do the moonshot. You can say let's land on Mars. You can say I was out in Silicon Valley last week and watched a startup talk about harvesting hydrogen from the surface of Mars. That's their idea. That's super cool. But you have to bridge the gap between when could that possibly help my company and where are we today? And that gap is just way too big. It's not that I don't believe in that. It's not that I don't think that's cool. It's not that I don't support that. But if you're an innovator at a company, you have to close that gap because otherwise you won't get anything done. If you spend all of your time as a in corporate innovation thinking 7, 10 years out, no one's going to listen to you because the stuff you're talking about is so over the hill, so pie in the sky, they'll just dismiss you. So you have to bring things that are reasonable and can be done today or in the near term and advocate for those and advocate hard. So I think we have a responsibility when we're talking externally, when we're talking about company innovation, to do that. If we spend all of our time talking about 7 years out, then we're conditioning our peers to promote things that they can't get done, and then innovation just kind of dies on the vine.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point because yeah, innovation isn't only about these really groundbreaking things. It can also be smaller things like renovation almost, you know?
Well, you can also, Dan, though, you can do crazy new things that are ready to go now,
How do
right?
you kind of split between the two, you know? So I imagine you do have a few kind of moonshot ideas. But what is it? Like 90% of it is things that we can implement in the next 3 years, and then there are some future 10-year plans?
Yeah, I think my approach to those kinds of ideas is I'm not really working on those ideas, but I have a list of what are those things that are those 7 to 10 year kind of things. And then so I'm constantly evaluating them and exploring them with startups and other places and listening for insight and exploring what the possibility of those are so that when that gap does close enough,
Right.
then I can execute.
You're ready.
So it's not that I'm not paying attention to them. It's not that I don't think they're important. It's that I want to close that gap.
This episode is brought to you by Prelaunch.com, the consumer and product validation platform. Why trust your innovation to market research dinosaurs who still rely on professional panelists to gather insights that you'll probably never use? When you pay your respondents to participate, their only incentive is to get through it fast and get paid. This practice has led to the growth of professional respondents, low quality responses, and even bots. Instead, on prelaunch.com, your future customers pay you before sharing their insights. Regular users discover your product via ads while browsing the internet, and if they actually want to buy it, they can place a small deposit to reserve it. This confirmation of purchase intent changes everything. Now, instead of straight lining through the answers in order to get paid, they're actually invested in your product development process. Their only goal is to co-create a better product for themselves. Prelaunch.com lets you test everything from pricing to product features, business models, audiences, messaging, positioning, and everything in between. Discover how you can gather bulletproof insights from your ready-to-buy customers on Prelaunch.com today. Right. Yeah. So you're ready when the innovative world catches up, in a sense.
When
I
your
kind of want to back.
company's ready. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I kind of want to backtrack a little bit. You mentioned Bud
Yeah.
Light, and there was an interesting thought there with the 24 karat gold cans. You ask people, they'll say, "Yes, of course, I'd want one." But then if you launched that, nobody would buy it. Nobody's gonna buy. I don't know what that would be priced at, $1,000 a can. Maybe a few people would. Um, How do you kind of, mm, validate these insights, you know? Because people might say a lot of things, but how do you know if there's actual, like, buying intent behind what they're saying?
So, right. So that's always in consumer insight, you oftentimes want to disconnect price from insight. because at least in the early idea stage, because you don't want people focused on price, you want people focused on the idea. And then you can say, well, how can I execute this at a reasonable price? And so if you get too hung up on price, then you forget about the idea. Like, no, just tell me about the idea, and then I'll figure out how I can deliver that in a unique way. But once you do get there, then how do you really understand consumer buying behavior? There's all kinds of ways to do it, but one of the so when I was at Purina, I worked with this company, and we created this methodology that we referred to as a retail lab. And what that meant was we would go to, so these were pet food products. And so we would go to small pet stores in big cities, like your strip mall pet store, Bob's Pet Food or whatever. And they've got a decent sized store in a strip mall or whatever. And we would go to them and we'd say, "Hey, I'll give you some cash for the weekend, for Saturday and Sunday, and here's what I want. I want to be able to set up a small folding table right inside the front door of your store, and I want an end cap in your store. On that end cap, I'm going to put my new product. At my table, I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm just going to introduce this to people. So my goal is not to sell it. My goal is to test new messaging, right? We were talking earlier around different messages mean different things. And so we would, for 1 hour, we would say, hey, can I tell you about this new X? And then an hour later, we'd switch it to, hey, can I tell you about this new Y?
Hmm.
And we would tell them
Same
about it.
product.
Same exact, nothing else changed. And then we'd say, hey, it's right there. If you're interested, it's on the shelf over there. And so then we could just watch what people did. Now, the key to it is it's Saturday and Sunday. So people are coming in on a Saturday morning, baseball hat on their way to a soccer game, kids in tow, dogs in the car, all these things. So two things. One is if they're willing to stop and talk to you and listen to the message. If what you just said, they're like, hey, wait, tell me more. Now you know your message is on, because you know that in the stream of their normal life, they stopped. So you're onto something there. Then if they buy it, now you've got real consumer behavior, right? You didn't do anything. I didn't offer them a discount. I didn't try and sell it. I just told them about the product and then let them do what they wanted to do with it. And so that's a great way to do it. And what we would say to these retailers is, hey, anything that sells, you also keep the profits. We don't want it. They're like, it's fine. Like, no big deal. So we paid you money for the weekend. We let you keep any revenue generated off the sale. Every dollar rang, you get. And a third piece was we wanted to intercept people that decided to buy or not buy and do quick interviews with them. And we would hand out gift cards to the store. So if you're a small retailer, you just got, call it $10,000 cash for the weekend or $7,000 cash for the weekend. That's a big amount of money for a small retailer for the weekend to do something pretty simple. And so we would go about doing things like that. I think the more you can, in my term, swim in the stream of a consumer's life, the better off you are. If I'm a huge advocate for consumer research. I'm a huge advocate for qualitative research, for talking to people. I can bring people into a conference room, into a focus group room with the mirror and all that stuff, and I can listen to them, and I can get great insight from that. But the closer you get to their normal everyday life and just interacting with them there, the better off you're going to understand them.
Yeah. And I think, like, as a chief innovation officer, you still get in there with the people.
I think it's
Because I think
critical.
that's like a yeah, that's one of those disconnects where the higher up you go, I feel like the more detached you become from the end consumer, but I think it's important to keep that tied to them, understand where your product's ending up.
Yeah, I mean, I challenge our board. I challenge our senior executive team when I'm with them. Hey, when was the last time you were in one of our warehouses? When was the last time you rode along with one of our truck drivers? When was the last time you were on a customer's dock helping unload a truck at 3 a.m.? Right? And they don't all go do that all the time, but a lot of them do. Our CEO, just a couple weeks ago, he went on a weekend and went along and rode in the passenger seat with one of our truck drivers as he was making deliveries. right? Now, he didn't
Yeah,
ride
that's
with him
amazing.
for hours and hours and hours. He rode with him for a few hours, but he got to sit next to him in the cab, see what his life is like, talk to him, do a little bit of the work he's doing. There's a huge amount of empathy created in those moments. Find moments where you can create empathy, because you're 100% right, Dan. We get to a senior level, and then we try and pull back on an experience of what it was like 20 years ago when we were there. The world is different today. And so that doesn't mean you got to do it, day in and day out, but take a moment a couple times a year and go engage in a different way and understand your business at that level. One of the things that I did at Purina, and one of the things we do here at Dot, is we run insight sprints. So at Purina, we did it every single month. Here at Dot, once a quarter, we go out to a different market. I take a different group of people from internally at Dot, and we go listen to retailers, restaurant owners, distributors, consumers, and we just go and embed ourselves in a market, experience what they're experiencing, see what it's really like. Because what a senior manager tells you how the world is, that's not how it is. It's there's a difference between the idealistic way senior management sees the world and how it actually happens. And so go out and do those things.
That CEO story especially was fascinating because I think a lot is lost in quantitative data, no, in like the summaries of everything. 1,000 people thought this, but seeing that one person's experience, hearing that one person's pain points, oftentimes you get higher quality insights, I think, from those individual qualitative responses. And I wonder kind of like, how do you balance these two? The all the data, but then find that needle in the haystack. This is the person we should be listening to. Sure, 80% of them aren't agreeing with them, but this is the one we should focus on.
Well, I mean, I would encourage everybody use I love quantitative data, right? Here's what I love about quantitative data: it unequivocally tells you what, right? It tells you what is happening. 60% of the people X, 80% of the people Y, whatever it is. Mine that data, find the what, find the key things in there. But don't stop there, because once you get that, you're left with a really, really, really important question, which is, why is that happening? And quantitative data really struggles to tell you why. And so, how do we understand why? The reason we can understand why is Dan can say, I'm, 80% happy with X. Great. I know Dan's 80% happy, but I don't understand why he's happy. The way I understand whether Dan is happy is to go talk to Dan and say, Dan, so I understand you're happy. Tell me why you're happy. And then you're going to give me this really great texture of information that's going to get it down to the little the micro level of what is it that really made you happy. And so then I can use that to develop products, to develop communication, to do customer service, to do all the things I need to do, because now I can connect what you think with why you think it.
Mhm. But then
And
what makes my experience more valid than Ben over here, Is that where you test these different messages in the store, for
sure,
example?
yeah, I think you have to have more than one conversation, but if you can only have one conversation, have one conversation. One conversation is better than no conversations. I say all the time when I teach or when I speak that empathy is your superpower. Your ability to have empathy with your customers, with your employees, with your whoever it is, that's your superpower, and no one can take it away from you. The more you leverage that superpower, the better off you'll be.
Yeah. Okay. I want to switch gears again back to Bud Light, because I know you were on the team behind Bud Light Lime, and I'm really curious to hear how the insights came about there, how you tested them, and how you took that product to launch.
Well, so Bud Light Lime starts with a massive years long effort to do a customer segmentation study, which is a quantitative instrument, right? We were talking about it before. Now we did it three-dimensionally, which is unique in the way we did it, because normally it's two-dimensional, and we added a third dimension, which was a flavor profile, like if you think about taste, right? So bringing in taste, not just or sensory, is a variable in there, and so that was the third dimension we added to it. And so when you do that, one of the things we saw in that data was that there was this white spot around a sweeter profiled beer for females, right? And so that then set our innovation brewers, our test brewers, down a path of how could we create a sweeter product to kind of meet that niche in the marketplace. And so that's this, so they developed a liquid which ultimately became Bud Light Lime to meet that gap in the marketplace, right? And so then we go out and we start testing this. Well, what we realize is basically what we've created is Corona, a version of Corona. It's a light lager beer with lime in it, which sounds a lot like a Corona with the lime in the top.
Yeah.
So now you have a problem. And you're like, well, why do you have a problem? That's perfect. You're going to compete with Corona. Well, here's the problem. Back in the day, and even today, even more so today, Anheuser-Busch owned 50%, 49.99% of Corona. And so you don't
You're
want to
competing against
cannibalize.
yourself. Yeah.
That's right. You don't want to compete against yourself. You don't want to attack yourself. This is a dumb idea, right? Like, I'm not going to go punch myself in the face just because I feel like it one day. That feels dumb. So now you have a problem. You've created a product that meets a need for a consumer base, and that they like it because we've tested it, but now you're competing against yourself. So how do you delineate? Well, again, step back into insight. What is it about Corona? Corona is about being on the beach. It's about summer. It's about, all those things, relaxing in the shade under an umbrella. Okay, well, there's plenty of other places where you can do that. So, I wasn't the only one that was part of these teams that stepped back and said, okay, how can we think differently about being a beach beer, but not at the beach? And so, because we don't want to compete with Corona at the beach. And so, that led to all kinds of things that we executed around taking over intersections in Manhattan at 5 o'clock on a Friday and dumping dump trucks of sand in the intersection and creating a beach right in the middle of a giant urban environment and throwing a beach party not at the beach. And
For
so now
Bud
you could,
Light Lime.
that's right. So you could be the beach beer, not at the beach. And so you could do those kinds of things and not cannibalize the brand.
Right, right. And then in these industries, the CPG industry, like the alcohol market, I imagine things are shifting constantly, attitudes, consumer attitudes. How do you ensure that these insights that you gather, they're timely but also relevant by the time the product launches a year after? How do you ensure the longevity?
Well, I mean, one of the things that, at least back in, it's been a while since I was at Anheuser-Busch, right? But one of the things that we were really good at was being fast. Because once you're onto something, being able to move fast. So Bud Light Lime, for instance, it went from that, hey, wait, there's a white space in the market, to a national launch in 6 months.
Wow.
Now, that takes the whole organization to say, let's go. Let's get behind this. It takes, and any senior manager, any senior executive that's listening to this podcast right now, this is on you. You have to clear the path. You can't just say you want something done in a private meeting to your executives. You need to say to the company out loud at a meeting, in a video, in whatever it is you're going to do. Hey, here's what we're going to do. And I need everybody listening to this to say, what part can I do? What problem can I solve? When somebody comes to me and says, I need to do this, then you need to say, what can I do to help? How can I help work around the issue we're having? I need you to help. If as a senior executive, you only say it to your team in a closed door meeting, No one else heard it, and they will continue to fight against it because go back to the beginning of our
The
conversation.
inertia.
Inertia
Yeah.
has them going in one direction. Until you've told them it's okay to shift, they won't because what we're human. They're going, if I mess this up, my pocketbook, my bonus, my paycheck, my performance review is on the line. If you come over the top and you say, it's okay, I want you to do this, then you've given them permission and they will execute better for you. And so it's on us, it's at the more senior levels to give permission to fail, to give permission to solve problems, to give permission to think differently.
Those are great points. It's kind of like you're building this innovation ecosystem where we're not afraid of innovating. We're not afraid of taking this next step. We can think differently. We can do things differently.
And we can rally as a team, right? And in Bush, it was around a product like that. It was whatever has to be done, we're going to do it. And everybody understood, okay, this is what the priority is. How do we work through whatever the issue is we're having right now? We got to figure out how to get, the ingredients or do packaging or labels or whatever it is. All right, what do we have to do to clear those hurdles? And how can we help each other think through it as opposed to going, nope, that's not how it's done,
Yeah.
right?
And what are
And
the like the challenges to setting something like this up as a CIO at Dot Foods? I imagine you're kind of building that ecosystem there as well.
I
What
think you just,
challenges do you face?
yeah. I think number one is you have to be present. You have to constantly be talking about these things. There is no silver bullet to culture when it comes to innovation or any culture, any culture around anything. You have to live it. You have to expose it. You have to keep talking about it and live it every day. And you have to advocate for it over and over and over again. And it's a drip, drip, drip. You are not going to do one thing and then everybody's going to go, oh, great, and everything's going to change. That's not how it's going to happen. You're going to drip, 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 drip. And then 6 months, a year later, you're going to be in a meeting and somebody's going to, instead of somebody going, no, we can't do it. We've never done it that way. Somebody's going to go, you know, how might we do it differently than we've done it before? Or, yes, I love what you did, and we could do this. If you can get somebody from saying no, but to, yeah, yeah, I like your idea, and we could do this to solve the problem, that seems simple, but that can take a long time and a lot of drip. But when that moment happens, you get to lean back in your chair in that meeting and go, I win. I don't even have to say it. I just won. And
And it's
so
also
listen
giving the
for those.
people the confidence to speak up, no? That their ideas aren't getting shot down, that everyone
Well,
can bring
but
something
I
to the
think
table.
totally, Dan. But I also think we have to be realistic with people that 95% of ideas are going to die. If you came to my office, you went to my office, there's an actual graveyard with a headstone in my office. And that's where I put all the ideas that we kill. And that doesn't mean that they were bad ideas. It means that we can't work on everything. And so to be effective, we have, if 100 people at the company send me an idea, I'm going to kill 95% of them. And so people need to understand that we want them to keep giving ideas and that we're going to kill a lot of them. Sometimes 10 of their ideas will combine into one idea. And so they may see a piece of their idea go forward. But people have to know that we want them to keep giving ideas and that we're going to kill most of them. Not because we need, we don't think they're good ideas, but because we can only do so much.
Yeah, that makes sense. Coming from a background in copywriting, I'm very used to having my ideas killed. Yeah.
That's right. You can't take failure personally.
That was a great chat, Jeff. Thank you so much. There was a lot of amazing advice in there. I'd like to kind of ask one last question. A little bit more advice for future insights leaders and innovation leaders. What advice is there in these changing times with AI and everything else going on?
Well, so here's my here's my advice, which is number one, always solve a problem. Number two is always if you're in a corporate innovation role, always try and bring some reason to some reasonable approach to that innovation. Don't go all the way out here because no one will follow you. So bring that in. And the last thing is, don't overreact to what the current trends are. So you just brought up AI. I've been at 20 conferences this year and every conversation's about AI. Well, here's my pushback always on AI. I love AI. We have multiple projects going on with AI, literally several right now running out of my group. So I'm not an opponent of AI at all. But here's my but, which I don't normally say because I'm an innovation and I like yes and not no but. But every single person watching this, at some point in your career, you worked for a company and there was some big project going on. Call it Project X. And Project X was this big initiative. And every meeting you went to for 6 months after that, people would go, oh, that's going to be part of Project X. Oh, Project X will solve that. Oh, Project X. That's part of Project X. And so you end up with everybody just then stops doing anything over here and says Project X is going to solve for it all. Well, what's the reality? When Project X gets done, how many of those things did it actually do in its first iteration? Like this little sliver, one or two of them. So it doesn't actually do it, right? And so why is that happening? That's because Project X, just like AI, becomes a shiny object. And so it becomes the thing everybody's going to do, and it's going to solve everything. So don't overreact to the shiny object is my last piece of advice. Let AI do what it needs to do. Focus on it, pick some very particular things, whether it's AI or something else, and do it well and prove it out and then expand from there. But don't overreact to what's happening in the marketplace. Look at the longer term and be measured in how you approach some of these things.
Amazing piece of advice. Thank you so much, Jeff. That was an amazing chat. It was great having you.
So thanks so much. I'll look forward to talking again sometime.
Okay, take care.
Take care.
Thank you so much for joining us today for another Innovation Impossible story. I hope you enjoyed the insights and all the practical advice as much as I did. Please give us a like and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. We're just starting out, and like innovating, this feels impossible. And head on over to YouTube and let us know if anything resonated with you or if you completely disagreed with anything, and we can spark some healthy debate into the world of innovation and insights. Thanks again to our sponsor, prelaunch.com, our guest for joining, and you for listening today. And see you again in a couple of weeks.